a lot of speculation. Were the Death Riders and Jon Moxley going to hold hostage that AEW World Championship? And we said earlier, Bully, how you kind of said, hey, I don't want any blood in this show until the main event. They saved it. But, man, that was a classic Texas death match on Saturday. You're not getting that kind of match in the WWE. It's not happening. They're not doing anything like that in the WWE. So you have a chance, like they did on Saturday, to do something that the mighty WWE cannot touch and cannot do. I mean, the F words, the middle fingers, the blood. Like, the WWE's not going to go there.
Because they don't have to go there.
And listen, that's fine. But we talk about being an alternative. I like that. I like the blood. I like that. I can't get that in the WWE.
When done correctly, and the Texas Death Match was done correctly, when done correctly, it's awesome to watch.
It really is.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm a fan of, the King of the Death Match, the Onitas of the world, the Funks of the world, the Cactus Jacks of the world, the Pogos of the world, masters of the death match that could take the gruesome and the macabre and the death-defying and put the psychology in it. Love that stuff because it had psychology. Kind of like when Sabu would set up a table and then not use it until 10 minutes later. The psychology of the table. This goes back to like the Moxley bleeding every week, right?
Yeah.
Carlos Colon bled every week. Abdullah the Butcher bled every week. But there were reasons why these guys were bleeding. Jon Moxley would bleed in matches where you don't even understand why he was bleeding. He would take a clothesline and he'd start to bleed. That's not a stretch. That happened a couple of times. So when you just throw it away and you whore it out, it doesn't mean anything. They've stayed away from it for a while. It meant everything. And there wasn't anything in that Texas death match that was far beyond the realm. The syringe.
Don't eat it.
Cinder blocks.
Don't
like
eat
a
it.
lot of the stuff that I saw, I have seen in the past. Like when I see the bed of nails, I think Abyss in TNA. And it worked. And it worked. When I see a barbed wire table, or I see the glass, or I see... Man, I loved how Hangman originally busted open Moxley. Whatever he had in his hand... Whatever he had in his hand, whether it might have been the tip of a fork.
It was a fork.
Okay, so what they did was they probably took the fork and they probably shaved the prongs to make them sharper, pointier, more razor-like. So that when Hangman holds it at the base of the prongs, where just enough of them are exposed, he's punching him in the top of the head, and just the very centimeters, tip-top centimeters of the fork prongs are touching the top of Mox's head and slicing him open. That was probably one of the most realistic moments I've ever seen with the use of a weapon. It wasn't like taking the fork and holding it into the top of the guy, and like grinding it into his head, where there's not any movement. This was real movement. There's a method to the magic madness. And last night, the way they did that was great. He looked like he was legitimately gouging his head with the fork.
I know this is going to sound crazy. It was beautiful. The way they did it was beautiful because it wasn't like, it was just, it started with just a small little dot and then just became like a pool of blood on top of his head as he was gouging the fork into his forehead. It was great. I loved it.
Abdullah the Butcher, the madman, the wild man from the Sudan, who always had a fork right in his hand. you would see Abdullah take the fork and he would put it on the guy's forehead and then make it look like he was doing something with the fork. You never actually saw Abdullah, I mean, maybe it did happen once, actually stabbing.
No, it was like usually like the flat end of the fork, he would press it against the forehead.
Right. And then once a guy was bleeding, then Abdullah would make a stabbing motion, but he'd be hitting the bottom of his fist. A little bit of smoke and mirrors there. What they did the other day, probably the most realistic way I've ever seen an object used to bust somebody open and get blood.
I agree. I thought it was fantastic. And even the setup for it, like, you know, Moxley pulls out the fork and then he goes for it. He gets it stuck in the top turnbuckle, and then he turns around and Hangman takes out the fork. I thought that was great.
And the psychology behind sticking the fork into the turnbuckle, you are establishing in the people's minds, wow, look at how sharp that fork is. If it could pierce the turnbuckle cover, it can pierce flesh. Great idea to do that before you stick it in Moxley's head.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the shit I love. That's psychology. That's the shit that makes other stuff make sense. It's not just done for the sake of doing it. It's not just pulling out a table and using it. Boom, done, see you, bye. That's the psychology of a death match. Little things like that.
I thought they did a fantastic job with that. And again, like, you know, Paul, our producer, said earlier that was the greatest moment in AEW history. I mean, top 3 greatest match in AEW history, I think. And, like, I'm not talking about a 1-hour draw with Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay or Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson. And I'm not taking anything away from that. When you see the pure emotion, because there's actual hatred between two men, but there's something at stake in that championship, and that championship is meaningful. Like, you can't give better storytelling than that.
Everything you could have possibly wanted in a main event, everything that you could have possibly wanted in a Texas death match, all the culmination of the story coming together. We didn't like the story, but it all came together in the end. A great job by everybody. There was a miss or two in the match that I'm just shocked. There was one glaring miss to me, Dave. And I don't want to harp on it, but I want to get your opinion on it, because I was like, we spoke about this at length. The miss to me was the use of Darby Allin.
Really?
Oh my God.
I think we're going to have a disagreement on this one. I love the way they use Darby Allin.
Not I. First of
Interesting.
all, they show the video, right? They show the video. I don't think many people knew. I don't think many people in-house knew, or you didn't get it at first. Like, it was very grainy, it was noisy, and then all of a sudden you see a guy, you see snow, it looks like a mountain, you kind of understand it's Darby, but his face is all covered up and he's got a goatee, and he says something like, you know, Mox, I'm coming down this mountain to get you. There's not much of a response from the crowd. So we see the video, and then we get the run-in from Danielson. And the place goes ballistic for Danielson. And Danielson shoves it right up the WWE's ass. Because according to Danielson in a recent interview, WWE asked him to stop doing the yes chants. Danielson slides in, takes off the hood, boom, yes chants, up your nose with a rubber hose. Place was going crazy. And then they lowered Darby from the rafters. The place was not going crazy.
I don't think they saw him.
Whatever it was, it's the return of Darby Allin. You're lowering him from the rafters. You said nobody saw him. Nobody understood it. Nobody got it. You missed. And then he's just standing there, and Moxley's just there staring at each other, right? And Darby's still all hooked up. And then Hangman grabs him and does the pile driver through the table, right? Mm-hmm. To me, if you're going to use Darby to his maximum potential, Darby should have been the last person that we saw before Hangman wraps the chain around Mox's neck and hangs him with it.
See, I'm going to go a different way. I understand.
You go back and listen to the response and then what does Darby do? He does a coffin drop and then Darby's gone. Bryan Danielson's response blew Darby Allin's response out of the water. They did not match. That's the one miss of the match, was the not using Darby to his maximum potential.
See, I like the fact that it was Swerve that gave Hangman the chain, because you weren't sure. Their relationship and the way that it's been, you didn't really know, but Swerve at the end of the day helped Hangman. I like that. I mean, fucking Darby was coming from a long way up. Like, holy shit. Like, the one nitpick I had is that they didn't stay with him. Like, they lost him and then they went back to him. Listen, I understand where you're coming from there. I thought it was great, and it's kind of what I said last week, that I felt like this was going to be their version of WrestleMania 40, where everybody in this story was going to play along into that match. And the match itself, Bully, I honestly thought it was absolutely fantastic. And really, one quick thing before you go back. One thing that added to it that I love was Jim Ross. Jim Ross does add a big match feel, and the nostalgia of it, the history of it. I thought it was important that Jim Ross was there, and thank God Jim Ross is feeling better enough that he was able to make that call for that main event. Great
to hear, JR. Great to see, JR. Want to go back to the Darby thing a little bit. Dave, remember when we had a conversation about star ratings on matches? Like, you see, 4.5 stars, 4.25 stars. It's like, why did you add 0.25, or why did you subtract 0.25? Like I don't get it. So here's what I'm going to say. I thought Mox and Hangman put on a 4.75 star match. I'm minusing the 0.25 because of the anticlimactic usage of Darby Allin. That's where I would take a little bit away from. I agree with you with Swerve giving Hangman the chain. That's part of the story. But this all should have happened, and Darby should have been the last one we saw. That big triumphant return from Everest, where Mox is like, everything has been done already, and now Mox is a deer in the headlights. Holy shit, he's back. Hangman wraps the chain around his neck, throws him over. I would have loved to have heard Darby's music. Without the music, there's no reason for the people to spring off their feet. It was cold. So I think they missed the boat a little bit on Darby. Don't miss my point, people. It was a great match. It was a fun match. It's exactly what it should have been. I wish they would have. And if it was just a generic run-in from somebody, like if it was Claudio or Marina or somebody who's been involved, I would have been like, no big deal. But we haven't seen this guy in a long time. And this guy decided to come back during this match. There was a way to catch lightning in a bottle with Darby Allin. They didn't do it.
Yeah, I guess the focus isn't going to be on Darby Allin. I like the way they did it. I didn't really have that much of a problem with it. I enjoyed just having him included. But you're right about Danielson, though. That place went absolutely apeshit, Bully, when they saw Bryan Danielson come out. And, and I'm glad that they brought out the plastic bag. They went back to like everything that was a part of the Death Riders run this last calendar year. Osprey getting involved as well. I think, we talked about Jessica Carr and what a great job she did. Dude, Paul Turner is that one referee at AEW where you got, Paul Turner does it and does it right. He doesn't look like a fool. He has that credibility. I liked how he was able to do it. I like, too, that you got that AEW chant during that match, because that's what it's all about, too, because it is kind of that's where I would have probably liked the AEW roster to come out at the end, because it really was about AEW getting that championship back and making it about AEW. Marina Shafir, I thought, was really good during the match as well. The Young Bucks involvement, but they threw everything out there. I thought Moxley, and especially Moxley, this is his type of match. He loves this shit. I really loved it. And then the briefcase opening. And I was worried for a second there. When he was having trouble opening up the briefcase, I was like, don't have him open up this fucking briefcase and it's empty. But the championship was there. Great feel-good moment. The buckshot lariat and Moxley on the bed of nails, and then the chain. And that it almost reminds you of Dusty Rhodes and Superstar Billy Graham with the bull rope. Here with the chain, and Moxley tapping out. I thought it was fantastic. Great use of blood. You didn't need syringes or bricks. What they had was absolutely fantastic. I thought it was as near perfect as you could get.
Excellent job by everybody involved.
Yeah, it really was. And I like how they completed the story, and we'll see what's next. I'm interested to hear now from Hangman Page, because Bully, Hangman Page is the guy. A lot of fans called in last week saying that his first run was underwhelming. Well, now he's the guy. He is the main guy in AEW. I'm interested what kind of promo we're going to get from him on Wednesday and how they start off Dynamite Wednesday night. Because now this is a complete turning of the page. This is a new era. You got that title away from Jon Moxley and the Death Riders. Now this is your ship. You're the captain. How Cody says when he was champion, he's the quarterback. Well, now Hangman Page is the quarterback. Let's see what kind of job he's going to do as the quarterback of AEW.
And who's the first guy in line for Hangman Page? MJF.
Has to be. He's the guy. He won the gauntlet match.
He won the gauntlet match.
Yeah.
He's the number one contender. MJF and Hangman? Yep, I'm into it.